The Amalfi Coast, the true iconic slice of Italian life. The part of Italy that has featured in countless films, television series, and even music videos. And it's a bucket list holiday destination for many a person around the world. So it's no wonder then that people often dream of moving to this part of Italy. I mean, with the picturesque views, why wouldn't you? But you see, there's something you need to know. The Amalfi Coast is absolutely breathtaking. There is no denying it. But it really isn't an easy place to live in. And in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down some key considerations that you must think about if your dream is to move to this part of the world. If you need a bit of context, I lived in Salerno city for 4 years and I'm back living in the Salerno province. So I know this part of the world very well. And I can tell you firsthand, it is not a place that I would choose to live in. So without further ado, let's talk about some of those key considerations, shall we, so that you can be sure that it really is the perfect destination for you to move to. Let's begin with the elephant in the room, which is, of course, tourism. In 2023, Campania, which is the region which encompasses Amalfi Coast, recorded that 564,981 visitors came to the Amalfi Coast that year. Now, last year there was a little bit of a decline due in part to the global economy and I'm sure some other issues as well. But this year is expected to be busier than ever. So you've got to think about it. You are living in one of the most iconic places in the world. Tourism is a natural byproduct of that. But is it something that you can get used to? Now, I'm sure, no doubt, you have seen that there have been countless protests in Spain against over-tourism. And whilst this is something that people are talking about here in Italy, it's not to the same extreme that it has been seen in Spain. However, I will say that you will notice that in Amalfi, people have started to put up privacy screens. They've started to put up fences against their homes to stop people from taking photographs outside their properties. This is the reality of living in such a beautiful part of the world. As a tourist, you don't necessarily think that that building you're taking a picture of has got a family inside who are trying to eat their dinner or are trying to get ready for work. You just see the building for what it is. You don't realise that there is actually a real person trying to go about their everyday life inside their home. And you can imagine if you were living in a place like that with people constantly taking photographs outside your home, you would feel very much like you were in a goldfish bowl. It's not a pleasant experience. Also, let's talk about traffic. The sheer volume of tourists, of course, adds to the traffic situation. Now, if you're not familiar already, the Amalfi Drive, the iconic road that connects the 13 coastal towns of Amalfi, is a one-way road on both sides, which means that you are not able to turn your car around and come back the opposite way if you hit a traffic jam. You have to sit it out. It's one of the things that makes the Amalfi Drive a particularly precarious place to go because you just never know if you're going to be lucky or not with the traffic. Now, various measures have been put in place over the years to try to curb how many cars can enter the Amalfi Drive at any given time, depending on your registration plate. However, it is still a really, really busy stretch of road with many twists and turns as well. It's not an easy road to navigate. But I will say to you that aside from the traffic, you've got to think about having all of these people filling up the streets, trying to navigate your way through them, trying to go about your everyday life with people everywhere. That is the reality of living along the Amalfi Coast, especially if you are in the centre itself and you're not tucked away up in the hills somewhere. It's not easy to live in a place that is a tourist destination. Aside from the crowds of people, you've also got to think about how just your location alone is going to bump the cost of everything up, from the cost of housing and even to the availability of housing, because essentially many properties along the Amalfi Coast now are holiday lets because landlords can make more money from tourists on a short-term lease than they could if they were to rent them out on a long-term basis. So many people choose to go down that road, which means that it limits the amount of long-term housing available for local people. That also said, you've also got to think about the fact that restaurants are going to be pricier because, of course, everything gets pushed up when it's a tourist place. And it's harder to find the places where just the locals go because you often share those places with tourists. For me personally, the Amalfi Coast has never, ever appealed when it came to deciding where to live, because as much as it's a really, really beautiful part of the world, I'm all too aware that it's not reality. It does not represent real Italy. Now, there are some lesser known towns along the Amalfi Coast, notably Beatrice al Mare, Maori, where you actually get a flavour of what real Italy is like. But unfortunately, in Amalfi itself, Ravello, Positano, all those really famous places, it's like you're in a bubble. That, to me, is not representative of everyday life. And when you live somewhere on a long-term basis, you too will notice that as well. For me, it's a choice to live in a place like that, absolutely. But you could do so much better and get more for your money by deciding to live outside of a big, popular tourist destination like the Amalfi Coast. So really think about this. And what else you must consider is that the tourist season really kicks off here at Easter time. So from Easter until around September, you have tourists flocking to the Amalfi Coast pretty much every single day. And let's not forget that you've also got public holidays where even Italian people will come to the Amalfi, not just international tourists. So you can imagine just how many people you will find in these places. However, when you roll into the winter months, Amalfi becomes almost like a shutdown location. Lots of businesses that primarily serve tourists close down for the winter months. So you end up, in a way, in a very, very different place compared to what it feels like in late spring going into summer. So this is something else you must consider about tourist places. They are not this hive of activity year round necessarily, especially so concerning the Amalfi Coast. During the winter months, it can be pretty bleak to live there for this reason. So you must consider this. If you want to live somewhere with a thriving community and with lots of things to do, you may not find that in the Amalfi during the winter months because so much of the Amalfi is geared towards tourism. So this is why this is such an important consideration to think about. Is it really the place that you could see yourself live in, or is it better perhaps just to visit yourself as a tourist? The second aspect to consider is, of course, logistics, how you are going to move around in your day-to-day life. Now, the Amalfi Coast is only served by one train station, and that is in Beatrice al Mare. So literally the first Amalfi coastal town outside of Salerno. All of the other 12 Amalfi coastal towns are not served by a train station. In fact, the only way that you can navigate your way across the whole of the Amalfi Coast is either by boat or by bus. Now, let's talk about this, because by boat, I always recommend Travelmar. It's like a boat taxi service. It operates from Salerno and it covers the Amalfi Coast as well as some other coastal places in that area. But I will say to you that they don't operate year round. They have periods of closure throughout the year. And also you have to consider that if the weather is particularly bad, they will not operate boats during that time. Let's not forget also, lots of tourists also use this service. So if you are using this to commute to work every single day or to get to a different city, you're going to find it very, very busy. And plus it's expensive as well. It's not easy to use this service every single day as if, it is your only means of transport. Now, when it comes to the bus network, well, the buses at the best of times in South Italy operate to a very flexible timetable, shall we say. But I think along the Amalfi Coast, it's really, really hit and miss, because it's really difficult, first and foremost, to know where to take the bus along the Amalfi Coast, because there are no proper designated bus shelters. You literally have poles at different locations along the Amalfi Drive with like the sign of the bus company at the top. Usually there are no timetables there. This is something that you have to research yourself online. So it can be a little bit unnerving, because you never know if you've made it to the bus stop in time for the last bus, or even if you're standing in the right place to begin with. So the buses, again, they can get super, super busy with tourists and with locals. And for me personally, I don't think it is ever a good idea to live somewhere where you are solely dependent on public transport, particularly here in South Italy. The Amalfi Coast is great if you're happy to drive or if you have a moped. But if you are dependent solely on the boat or on the bus, and the train is not so bad if you're in Vietri. That's probably the one advantage of living in that particular Amalfi coastal town. But for all of the others, if it is just the boat and the bus, I think you need to really think about how that's going to impact your quality of life on Sundays, on public holidays. How easy is it going to be for you to do the things that you need to do every single day when you are dependent on those services? That's what you must really, really sit with yourself, because it's one thing to look out of your window and have a view that blows you away, but it's another when you're putting your hair out trying to wander how you're going to navigate from where you live to a different city. So really, really reflect on this. It's not easy to live along the Amalfi Coast from a logistical point of view if you're not prepared to drive or to ride a moped. So you really, really do need to consider this if this is a place that you're interested in. Let's talk about hospitals. The Amalfi Coast doesn't actually have a hospital. The two nearest hospitals are in the two nearest cities to the Amalfi Coast at either end, Salerno and Naples. Now, for some people it's okay. If you have a car, you can easily make your way to the hospital if you need to. However, if you are one of those people who have decided to move to the Amalfi and rely solely on public transport, then this can make you feel a little bit vulnerable when you know that you don't have a hospital within easy access. This really becomes apparent when the weather's very bad, for example, or if there are ever any moments where it can be difficult to access the Amalfi Coast for whatever reason. And so you've got to think about this. For some people, having easy access to a hospital is a must, but you do not have this in the Amalfi. And so I really, really urge you to think about this, because if you are somebody who needs to access medical services frequently, or you're older, for example, and you want to have the security of knowing that your hospital is not too far away, this could be a real game changer for you. Let's talk about mobility, because it really surprises me how many people do not realise how hilly and steep the Amalfi Coast is. There are so many hills because you have got cliffs around you. Of course, everything is built into the cliffs and up the cliffs. So you can imagine just how many hills that you will encounter in every single Amalfi coastal town. There is a hill. Now, I will say to you that if you are somebody who struggles with mobility, or if you don't feel like you're at your fittest, this can be a bit of a struggle. Think about your shopping. How are you going to carry your food shopping home when you've got like a huge hill to navigate if you don't drive, for example? This sounds like a really, really simple consideration, but trust me, when you're living here on a long-term basis, these are the simple considerations you need to focus on. It's not the dreamy romantic, oh, I can take a bag of food home, I'm on holiday, this is lovely. Try doing that every single day or a couple of times a week, and I'm sure it will be a very, very different reaction that you'll have. So this is something to think about. You've got to be prepared for the landscape. You've got to be prepared for how hilly it can be. Because, of course, depending on where you want to live along the Amalfi, your home could be very, very high up that hill. So it's definitely something that you must consider. Let's talk about shops and services. Now, of course, the Amalfi Coast is serviced by different shops, restaurants, services, a lot of them geared towards tourists, as we've already spoken about. But when it comes to like the big supermarket chains, when it comes to shopping centres, you are going to have to leave the Amalfi Coast to go into Naples or to go into Salerno if you want to really find your big shopping centres or the really, really big supermarkets. You will find smaller versions of the supermarkets and like mini markets dotted around the Amalfi, but as much as they're really charming to go into when you're on holiday, when you live there, at some point you need more variety. And also, I think sometimes they can charge through the nose a little bit because they know that they are the only shop for miles around. So there is a lot to think about in terms of this. Again, it ties back into what I've been saying all along. You've got to really have your own means of transport when you live along the Amalfi for things like this. It's not easy to navigate your way to nearby shopping centres and larger supermarkets if you don't have your own transport. So really, really think about this. Shops and services are a little bit more limited along the Amalfi Coast because it is what it is. People leave the Amalfi Coast and go to neighbouring cities when they want to do things that they cannot find around where they live. So if you like that kind of life, then wonderful. But if you need variety, if you want to have a selection of shops to choose from and bigger shops at that, the Amalfi Coast is not able to provide that for you. So you've definitely got to consider this. And I guess the last thing I want to say is that you've really got to dive a bit deep with your reason for wanting to live along the Amalfi Coast. If it's for the beauty, if it's for the amazing scenery, let me tell you, there are plenty of other places not a million miles away from the Amalfi Coast where you can find beautiful backdrops and scenery, but which mean you're a little bit more central to the shops and services that are pretty essential when you're living in this part of the world. So I'm thinking Salerno is one of the biggest cities closest to the Amalfi Coast, and it has a selection of everything that you could need, including its own hospital, great services, really well connected, and it's got all the shops and amenities that you could possibly need, including the bigger supermarkets. Somewhere like this, which is only a short distance from the Amalfi Coast, in fact, it's only like 5 minutes away from Britaly, which is the first Amalfi coastal town outside of Salerno, is, in my opinion, a much better place to consider. Now, if you're interested in discovering Salerno a little bit more, and indeed if you're planning to come and visit, then why not check out my Salerno travel guide? I'll link it up here. But this is a city that, you know, retains a traditional feel. It feels like a proper Italian city, but you are still in an absolutely beautiful part of the world, but you're not dealing with the hassles and problems that I've spoken about in this video. And I really urge you, Amalfi is absolutely beautiful, but I really think that you have to have a particular mindset to live in that part of the world. And you have to make sacrifices in a way if this is a place that you've set your heart on living in. If you've enjoyed this video, I think you'll enjoy this video right here next, and I will see you in the next video.